Hi, I'm Andy Acton.
And I'm Chris Strevens.
This is Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast.
I find it quite remarkable that we're 180 odd episodes into this, and I still get taken aback by the things that happen in UK dentistry.
Yeah, I mean that's an episode I think probably unlike any we've had before.
Yeah, I don't think we've got any. I mean, people need to kind of listen to the backstory, but the next chapter. But to take your family to another continent to deliver care in a country that's got a pretty checkered past in terms of where it's at. I mean, it's going through a period of stability, which I'm sure James is thankful for. But it's quite a remarkable thing to be doing, and he seemed to do it with such kind of grace. It's like it just felt the right thing to be doing.
Yeah, the fact of anyone who thinks about attracting new patients. What was it? What did we work out? There's one dentist for 800,000 people. I was like,
well, yeah, you've got
that's just bonkers, isn't it?
I think in Liberia, there's 5 million people and 7 dentists at the moment. Although with his work and the work that's going on, hopefully that's gonna change over the decades.
I love it. It's because it wasn't just about dentistry. I think that's the exciting thing for people to listen to. It's not just about dentistry. It's about outreach. It's about everything. So it's fascinating chap.
Yeah, and also just what is possible. That kind of the limitations we put on ourselves, and then when you listen to somebody like James talk, you realise that actually, there really is a big world out there, and he's going to go out and make a difference.
And with his
really good,
as well.
really enjoyable.
No, it's
really
brilliant.
enjoyable.
Really good.
So it's 7:00 Monday morning. It can only mean one thing.
I'm awake. It must mean it is a Dentology podcast.
It's another Dentology podcast. It is. And this week, I'm delighted. We've got Dr. James Hunter joining us, who's a dentist. Welcome, James. How are you doing?
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on.
No, we're very excited. It's always nice when you find people who are kind of walking the path less trodden. And we'll get to that when we get on to the conversation of what you're going on to do. But to start with, I've actually got to read this because there's so many elements to it. I couldn't memorize it. But you were born in Singapore, moved to Colorado. When you were 3, you moved to Oxford. When you were 3 to Colorado. Then you moved to Oxford when you were 7, and now you're living in Cornwall. So the globetrotter in you started quite young.
Yeah.
I'm really interested.
Explain.
In the early years, how did that as a start to life in terms of kind of quite a nomadic lifestyle?
Maybe we can start with the why.
Yeah, how did that whole situation come about?
So I was born in Singapore. I think I lived there about 3 days, and then moved to Jakarta. So my mum was born in Singapore. My grandpa on my mum's side was a doctor out there,
right.
And then my dad, when he was 16, he got a scholarship to a school out in Singapore.
Right.
So he moved out there and then met my mum. They stayed all around that sort of area. They were living in Jakarta when they were pregnant with me. Moved to Singapore briefly to have me, and then moved back to Jakarta.
Wow.
So I don't remember any of that, but my parents love that part of the world.
Doesn't say much about maternity care in Jakarta, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think my grandpa working in Singapore was quite keen for them to come over there. And have a baby.
I bet.
Then moved back to the UK. I think when I was about 1.5, and then when we were 3, we moved out to Colorado. So that's kind of my first memories living out in. We lived in the most beautiful place. Yeah, I know. Yeah, absolutely.
And what took the family to Colorado?
So my dad's a businessman. So he kind of was CEO of a packaging company.
Is it a meat packaging firm? Please tell me it's a meat packaging firm.
It was kind of like little bits and pieces packaging. He still bring me back all these kind of
I've just
funny
seen Colorado
pieces of metal.
cows.
Yeah, I know. But I've got a friend who was my childhood friend out there, and occasionally my mum shares pictures of his life out there, and I think I've definitely still got a bit of red, white, and blue in me from those years.
I bet.
A beautiful part of the world.
I think it's vast, isn't it? I don't know if you remember the vastness. That's what always makes me think about that. You sort of think we've got big when you go out in the countryside here, but when you go to like the States or South Africa, it's just vast. It's big.
I was very fortunate. I got to go to the Grand Canyon several years ago, and I remember walking up to the edge, because obviously as you walk up to it, you can't kind of see down into it till you're right at the edge. And I'm getting there at the edge, looking and going, it's really big, yeah. And you sort of take it in, and then over kind of 5 or 10 minutes, it just dawns on you, just like the millions of years of water erosion to have created. And it's not just the depth of it, it's the width of it as well. It's absolutely incredible. It's phenomenal. And that, going back to your point, Chris, about scale and size, it shows you just how large it is in the open space they have out there, which is quite remarkable.
Yeah, we lived right on the edge of the kind of this big mountain, so our lounge could kind of look down the valley. When the snow came, got to learn to ski going down my drive. It was amazing.
Brilliant. And then you went to the exotic place of Oxford.
Yeah, so came back with a thick American accent, and then lost that at private school in Oxford.
They beat that out of you.
Yeah, more or less. Grew up there. Had a really lovely childhood. We weren't in Oxford city. We were kind of in the outskirts, in the countryside, which was really lovely. Went to a nice
part
school.
of the world, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, really pretty. So living in Cornwall now, whenever I go back, I do feel very far away from the sea. I think a bit inland.
So did you move to Cornwall, or your family moved to Cornwall?
I moved to Cornwall 4 years ago. Right. Yeah, so grew up in Oxfordshire, and then.
How's this kind of moving around a lot when you're young? I mean, not moving from like the south of England to the Midlands. We talked about global. Has that changed your outlook in terms of your willingness to move? You don't feel particularly rooted anywhere, home wherever you settle in that moment. How does that all look and feel for you?
I mean, I guess like moving away from what was kind of my first, the first home I have memory of. I guess maybe it's a little bit maybe less daunted by upping and moving to different places. I was really fortunate. My parents, took me to go see lots of different parts of the world. So they kind of took me around, Asia on various holidays, kind of to show me where they'd grown up, and I guess give me a real, love of traveling and love of seeing different parts of the world, different cultures. I think, although it's kind of only briefly, just having a slightly different background of just like a little bit of an American culture in me. I feel like maybe had a feeling like a little bit. Not
James, when you landed in your school at age 7 with your yeehaw accent, or whatever Coloradan accent is, how was it received by your co-pupils? I'm intrigued as to did they see it as odd? Did they see it as normal? Did you get any bullying, or was it like, he's got an American accent? Quite interesting.
I think it was the latter. I think it was, this guy's got an American accent, and then give it a few months and it was petering off. I don't remember any kind of negative.
Anyone giving you a hard time or anything? That's good.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah, which is lovely.
Brilliant. And then you went to another part of the world and studied at Cardiff Dental School over in Wales. But that wasn't your first degree, was it?
No. Yeah. So I went via Exeter. So at school, I kind of. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer for a while. That movie Liar Liar with Jim Carrey?
Yeah.
that scene where he's the barrister. I thought that looked like a fun job. So I actually did. I did humanities. I did Latin, maths, and ancient history at school, thinking that I'd want to go on to do classics. And then I was due to do classics at Exeter, and then thought I'd be. I wanted to kind of split and maybe do a bit of theology as well. So I'm a Christian, and I thought it'd be interesting to study my faith academically. So they kindly let me split half and half on the course.
Wow.
But honestly, about 2 weeks into my classics bits, I decided I never want to do Latin ever again. And they kindly let me swap straight over to theology. I was a very pretty girl in the theology class who's now my wife, so probably pulled me over to it a little bit.
So that was the switch there. But you didn't complete your theology degree. Is that right?
No, so I did complete my theology degree. Yeah. So So I finished the whole thing, and I proposed to my wife in second year, and then I think in third year it suddenly dawned on me that I needed to get a job afterwards, and I had no idea really what I wanted to do. I think it's the sort of degree that leads into applying for grad schemes, kind of just showing you've got the ability to
becoming a vicar.
Or becoming a vicar. I did briefly think about that, but my wife very kindly reassured me that wouldn't be my strength. So
I think you have to have a very I think you have to be a very special type of person to be a vicar.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my friends and family were kind of tossing around the word work shy. So I thought I'll try and get some work experience somewhere, and I literally kind of had that kind of childhood. I could be a dentist, a fireman, a pilot, a butcher, and thought I'll get some work experience with my family dentist, who was a lovely guy. Spent a week with him and thought, this is brilliant. This is what I want to do. This is amazing. So it kind of came a bit out of left field.
Yeah. It's intriguing you say about the work experience. The amount of people we've talked to. So we've done 170, 180 episodes of this, and I would say probably 20% of all dentists we talk to have had a work experience element that steered them very heavily towards becoming a dentist.
Sort of blew their socks off, didn't it?
It's I was saying it's amazing that happens. But we were also saying how in the current world, I don't think work experience is as easy. I think people are fearful of work experience today with, insurance and GDPR and the risks that go around having somebody in your business. I don't think it's as easy for young people to get work experience in kind of a clinical environment as it was perhaps back in your day. And it's a shame because the amount of people that have cited work experience as being the single thing that turned their head towards dentistry. We could be losing that.
Amazing.
Yeah, that would be a shame, because I guess that was all pre-COVID when I got to do work experience, but I bet that's going to change the feeling around it a little bit. And
absolutely. You say about COVID, you did your foundation training year through COVID and through the lockdowns.
Yeah.
What was that like? Because I guess one of the things that we hear, both Chris and I, we're not clinical at all, so we have no clue about the clinical side of things, but we hear an awful lot about the dental school experience prepares you incredibly well in terms of the structure of dentistry, but there isn't actually that much hands-on time with real patients. And very often it's a foundation year that gives you the practical application of what you've learned in dental school. Was that something that was missing in your experience? Because obviously during lockdown, you weren't able to get that practical experience as perhaps others might have.
Yeah, I mean, I think my foundation training course handled it really well. I mean, in hindsight, you're right. University's not really as hands-on, obviously, as in any scale compared to going into general practice. But we did have quite a lot of clinical time, I think, compared to some of universities at Cardiff. So I got to do a fair amount of practical work before graduating, and then I think it was a good 4-5 months. I'm trying to remember the timeline of foundation training. I had a really, really lovely, supportive foundation trainers who kind of really let me. Explore lots of different aspects of dentistry under their supervision. And then they put on a lot of kind of, like hands-on courses and phantom head sort of stuff. But it was funny. There was, I'm not sure if you guys remember, there was so much free CPD during the lockdown. I absolutely loved it. I almost feel like I graduated and then had like an extra condensed blitz of dentistry, and it was during that period that I heard first about biomimetic dentistry and these kind of ultra conservative, strong bonding sort of dentistry, and that's the sort of stuff I love now. And it wasn't really taught at all in our university course, but seeing people put on stuff on Instagram and then going on these Instagram lives with people talking through cases, I thought it probably gave me actually time to see elements of dentistry that I wouldn't have if that hadn't happened.
Right, yeah.
Just made sure I didn't waste it, basically.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So then you qualified, and then that's what actually took you down to Cornwall. You're working in a practice down in Cornwall.
Yeah, so my wife and I were kind of at that point so I had my son when I was in fourth year.
Right.
So we had like a 2-year-old in foundation training, and then we had another one who was on the way. So we knew we were going to outgrow our house in Cardiff, and we were just basically deciding, do we stay in Cardiff and stay here for the long haul, or do we do something different? We thought about maybe going abroad at that point, but kind of lockdown put a halt on that. So basically sent out my CV as a complete green dentist to lots of practices down in Cornwall, and kind of landed on my feet at a really, really lovely practice in Perranporth.
Okay.
And so we moved down after foundation training.
And what's that practice like?
I was going to say, there's a commonality of C, isn't there? Exeter, Cardiff, and Cornwall. This man likes a body of water.
Absolutely.
And is it a mixed practice, a private practice? What's it look like in terms of the dentistry you get to do?
So it's effectively a private practice, got a small NHS contract. So my practice principal's got 2 sites. So there's the site which I work at, which is kind of a more generalist practice, and then he's got a practice in Truro, which is set up for kind of the more high-end cosmetic, full mouth rehab, implant sort of dentistry that he does. So I work, I've got my surgery and then the therapist. So when I first arrived, it was kind of just me, which was, a bit of a, baptism of fire, but loved it. I've got an incredibly supportive principal. He kind of mentored me and, bailed me out on a couple of extractions which had gone wrong, and, helped kind of mentor me maybe more on the more business side and patient interaction sort of side of dentistry. And and then he's kind of just let me work in that site. I really like kind of endo. I'm very lucky to have an operating microscope in my surgery, which I was incredibly excited about. I've kind of been able to delve into that sort of aspect of dentistry. I've absolutely loved it. It's a brilliant practice, really lovely patient base, right next to the sea, lovely staff.
Doesn't that set the tone, Andy, that James likes endo? So now we know.
Exactly.
It's really funny, is it? Figure you like endo. Ooh.
But what I love is you can be passionate about anything, can't you?
Yeah, it's brilliant. I love
the stuff that floats your boat. Exactly. But things are about to change, aren't they? Because with your wife and your 2 children, Max and Phoebe, next year you're off on what sounds like the adventure of a lifetime. You're off to the West African country of Liberia. But before we get to what the reason you're going out there and the work you're going to be doing, how does that conversation start at home? What does that look like? Was it something that came from your wife to you, from you to your wife? Was it something you've always had an ambition? I was interested. How does that conversation start around the dinner table?
Would you like a cup of tea and any chance we could move?
To Liberia?
I mean, I think it's probably been a really, really, really long time in the making. My wife and I are both Christians. The churches which we kind of went to as kids had kind of little, charity elements to it, aid work elements to it. My wife's got family members who kind of do stuff in Nepal. And so when we started dating, I think we were both thought, at some point maybe we want to go do something abroad. And, at that point, I really didn't have anything particularly practical that I could offer. In my gap year, I went and did kind of a, aid thing in Africa briefly. I've heard somebody, it's a bit negative. I've heard sometimes people describe these kind of gap year things as the most expensive way of getting the least qualified people to do the poorest work in the shortest time frame, which was kind of a reflection. I think we dug a latrine, which hopefully hasn't fallen down. But before I went to Cardiff, I did I visited some friends who were working out in Sierra Leone, and I took the opportunity to go and see the dentist who was working in the hospital there. And it was amazing. I kind of started the day, he honestly had about 50 people in. They came in one after another, numbed them up in a bit, sent them to the back of the queue, and then, brought them back in and treated them. I think suddenly I was like, wow, dentistry is going to give me something really practical that I can go and take somewhere to help. So that kind of stayed with us through my dental degree. And then I say at the foundation training period, it was suddenly like, is this a good transition point to maybe go do something like that? But then, the world shut down and that kind of stopped. I'd say it almost just went to the back of our minds for a while. And then last kind of March time, we both kind of independently felt maybe we felt that kind of itch to go do that again. I'd say just at the point where our life was feeling very settled and nice and stable, and we both kind of came to each other and spoke about it, and sent off an application to the organisation who we're going to be going with at that point.
Wow,
I wonder whether there's something.
Oh. So I was going to say, do you remember we did some work with, I think it was Dentaid, and I think they did something to Tanzania. I might be getting completely wrong place. And I can remember talking to someone who had been there, and they were saying, you forget that people moan about access to dentistry in the UK, but that he was saying that there's like one dentist for like 20,000 people, or 100,000 people, and when you put that into context, it's like, it's just mad, isn't it? I mean, that what was that charity we sponsored, Mobile Smiles. They go around and do dentistry for people who don't access it. So it's amazing.
What would be quite useful, James, is I know where Liberia is. It's on kind of the western horn that sticks out in Africa, and we give a presentation about leadership. So I'm familiar with Ellen Searleaf, who was the president from 2006 to 2018, something like that. And the thing that made her special is she was the first democratically elected head of state in Africa. So she mobilised lots of females within Africa, which is amazing. Yeah. But for most of our listeners, they'll have heard of the country and won't know much about it. Can you just describe what the landscape of that country looks like, but also the state of rural healthcare? Because as Chris was just saying, I think you said in the information you sent over to us that there's a population of 5 million people and there's 7 dentists in Liberia.
As of the most recent WHO survey, 7 dentists. So about one for just under 1 million.
I was going to say, we're looking at about 800,000 patients you got to get through.
Working hard.
Yeah, exactly. So what does the country look like in terms of its makeup? It's on the coast, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's on the west coast of Africa. It's bordered by the Atlantic Ocean, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and the Ivory Coast. And it's about half the size of the UK, but the population of 5 million, like you say. I mean, I think it's the history of it that really gives the context. I'm happy to go over a little bit of that.
Love to.
Yeah, so basically, you kind of would describe it as being a country with a really, really tough recent history. It was founded in the 19th century. Basically as an outpost in Africa for freed slaves who were leaving the United States after the Civil War. My understanding, there was quite mixed sentiments about whether or not that was a positive idea or a negative idea, or whether there were good motivations or bad motivations behind it. But ultimately, about 4,500 freed slaves travelled to Liberia over the course of a couple of decades. And of those, only about 1,800 survived. The country then achieved independence in 1847, but sadly, basically, the descendants of those freed slaves, who were known as the Americo-Liberians, they kind of consolidated power and basically held total social and political control of the country. And they almost treated the indigenous Liberians in the same way as they'd been treated in the United States under slavery. This then caused escalating tensions, and it eventually came to a head in 1980 when there was a violent military coup. The Americo-Liberian president and his cabinet were all executed, and the first indigenous Liberian president, called Samuel Doe, he took control of the country. Sadly, again, his time in power was characterized by corruption, nepotism, and persecution of all the rival tribes. And eventually he was killed in 1989, which triggered the start of the first Liberian Civil War, and that lasted 7 years until 1997. That conflict led to the death of about 200,000 people, and hundreds of thousands of people fled as refugees. And at the end of that period of time, there's a man you might have heard of called Charles Taylor, who was president. Yeah. So he's currently in prison up in Durham for war crimes. But
Naomi, was it something to do with Naomi, whatever her name is? What was the model?
Naomi Campbell.
Naomi Campbell. Wasn't there something about diamonds? Something to do with diamonds and Naomi Campbell or something?
Maybe.
Be careful about that, just in case I've allegedly something about there was some diamonds or something. Can't remember now.
That blood diamond movie. That's the kind of the Sierra Leonean side of that Liberian Civil War. But under his rule, there was kind of tentative peace for a couple of years, but then there was a second civil war which broke out in 1999. that lasted until 2003 and led to the death of another 250,000 people, and an estimated 1 million people were displaced as refugees into the nearby countries.
Wow.
As you said, since then there has been peace and several fair and democratic elections, but basically the aftermath of that civil war has been felt everywhere, and it's destroyed a lot of the country's infrastructure. And then to top it all off, in 2014 they had the West Africa Ebola virus outbreak started there, and they don't have a kind of 2-year fight against Ebola, but it's kind of a whistle-stop tour of the recent history of the country.
Yeah, it's a troubled country, isn't it?
When you think about percentages of population, that's huge, isn't it?
But I suppose I'll just think about it in terms of how long it's taken the Irish situation to kind of calm down between Northern Ireland and the Republic, and how that flows through generations in terms of how people feel about what their forefathers went through. And I'd imagine that in Liberia, you've got a similar situation where you'll have lots of not the indigenous Liberians, but people who came over from America. There will still be descendants of those people living in Liberia. So I bet there's probably lots of kind of grumblings and under tensions happening, and with the potential for them to flare up.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a really complicated political structure, but I gather that some of the people who are kind of maybe involved in the civil war in a negative way are in still positions of government, and that's got causing a variety of thoughts and tensions.
So you've got that underlying potential instability is there, isn't it? Which is it's an even bolder move.
I mean, I've been reassured that I gather it's a nice stable country now, and like I say, they've been fair and free elections, so hopefully that kind of tension is
Wow.
And have you been out there on some recce's? Have you done some trips out there already to kind of get a sense of the place?
Yeah, so my wife and I went out for a week last October, just as kind of a trip to see is this where we are going to move our family?
Right, yeah.
What does your wife do, James?
So she's been a stay-at-home mum since we've had our kids. So we've got 6-year-old and 4-year-old. She went on and did a master's in theology, and then some counselling training.
Okay.
So yeah, she's kind of she keeps saying every time she just starts getting off, I kind of we go somewhere new, and I leave her a bit in limbo. So she feels a bit in limbo at the moment in terms of kind of going for the next step in what she wants to do, because we know we're going to be leaving in 6 months.
I'll tell you what, though, I mean, if a bit of
counselling,
my son-in-law, so sort of on a bit of a side, we have a faith as well, and they work in a gangland place in South Africa, and he is studying to get his sports psychology degree, but part of it says you can do pro bono work to help with the trauma. So I sort of think your wife's going to have a place there.
Yeah, no, it sounds similar actually. Yeah, she's exploring kind of trauma counselling. Out
there. There's a lot of trauma.
And what, based on the trip you had back in October and then going out next year, what do you think are going to be your early challenges when you arrive? From a family point of view and also from a dental point of view. Do you know where you're going to be living yet? Do you know what the setup's going to be?
Yeah, so the whole operation is on this this compound called Elwa compound, which basically prior to the Civil War starting, the organisation who we're going with, they set up a radio station on this compound, and then that evolved into a hospital and then a school, and so there's this kind of compound outside of Monrovia, which is where we'll be based. I'm probably going to be moving into the house of the dentist who we're kind of loosely taking over from. So it was nice to be able to see that. I think in terms of, heat is going to be the immediate acclimatization. I'm a cold loving guy. So it's 27 degrees and 100% humidity all year round, day and night there. So that'll be an adjustment. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a really big adjustment as a family. It's been, I think, even these last 18 months, it's been, lots of up and downs. There's been bits where we've been incredibly excited. There's been bits where we've thought, what on earth are we doing? How do we need to get out of this? But I'd say that over the last few months, we're feeling like a really big sense of confidence and really excited. Good. So there's going to be lots of challenges. Clinically, it's going to be kind of a completely different sort of dentistry to what I do now. I remember when I initially sent out the email to the guy who's taking over, I said, I'm James, I work in this practice. I like endodontics and working in the microscope. And he was like, not a lot of need for that here.
Yeah, can you take teeth out and fill them?
Will it be as simple as kind of extractions and taking people out of pain? Is that the majority of what you'll be doing?
So I'll be doing a mix. I'll be doing some work on the clinic. I think it's going to be the case of arriving and seeing a little bit of what niche I can fit into. They get a lot of really big pathologies, and so they work alongside a clinic in Guinea to do these big kind of max fac surgeries.
Wow.
But the other part of it is so I'm going out to work in a clinic called Trinity Dental Clinic, but the guy who moved there to start running that back in 2017, he was a bit of a visionary and was just really struck him that actually it's all well and good people kind of coming and helping, but actually it's the Liberian workforce that needs to be built up. And so the exciting project he's done is he's started something called the Liberia Dental Therapy School, and the aim is that over the 10 years, his first 10 years, it's going to train up 70 therapists. And so he's worked alongside Plymouth University to come up with a degree course. It's being accredited by a university in Liberia, and they've just had their first 7, I think it is, therapists graduate. And the aim is that they are going to be able to go back to their home counties with actually DentAid field kits and be able to provide dental care in their local areas. And so I'm going to be doing some of the teaching for that. And I think that is probably the most exciting element of it. It's going to be really cool seeing different clinical things. But I gave an example. There was when we went out in October, there was a young boy who I met on the clinic who, this poor guy, had lots of decay and a terrible toothache on his upper right molar, and his mother had taken him to go see a traditional healer, and they think that basically he mixed up a bunch of different herbs up with battery acid and put that into the tooth, and it just destroyed his whole of his maxilla on that right hand side. So he attended the clinic with just loads of necrosis, and Simon had to take out all of his teeth from that side and most of the bone. And what I think is cool is that obviously him receiving that treatment there probably saved his life, but within hopefully 10 years, that mum will have somewhere to take her son, and it won't be the case that she has to go take him to somewhere where they're inadvertently going to cause more harm than good. They'll be able to take him to go see the local therapist who's been trained up properly.
I think training the people, given that you've got a stat of 5 million population and 7 dentists, is the only way for the country to be genuinely supported from an oral health standpoint. Because 7 dentists, you can't do it. And I guess all you're going to be doing is dealing with the most extreme cases you can. But there's so many people, you just get another raft of extreme cases coming in. Whereas, like you say, if you can get therapists and hygienists and more dental care professionals, particularly out in the regions, it's going to take time, but it will deal with it. And I can see why for you that is an exciting part of it. Doing the day-to-day dentistry will be great, but supporting other people to deliver that service themselves will be very cool.
Well, you become part of a legacy, don't you? That's the hope, is that you create something that's self-perpetuating that will eventually go from 800,000 patients per dentist to 400,000 to 200,000. It's a long old journey, isn't it? No, brilliant. Hats off to you, James.
Absolutely. What will family life look like for you out there in terms of? The kids are still reasonably young, but schooling and where you'll live and that side of things. You're saying you're probably going to move into the dentist's house. What does that look like?
So it's a lovely place in some respects. It's right on the Atlantic coast, so just next to the beach, sticking near the sea, which is good. So there's a little absolutely there's a little co-op school just on the compound as well. So we visited that when we were out there. think there was about kind of 30, 40 kids split over 2 classes.
Right.
And so, Max and Phoebe will be attending that. I think the only issue is that the teachers seem to come and go a little bit. So the teachers we met when we went out there, they've moved on. And so I think just the capacity for how much schooling they're able to provide probably changes year on year. I think my wife's definitely praying that they've got lots of teachers, because our son's very busy, and I think homeschooling would be a intense endeavour. But I think so they've got schooling kind of at that, in theory, kind of all morning into the early afternoon. And then I think my wife, so the dentist we're kind of going to swap with is called Simon, and his wife Grace does lots of work within the hospital. There's kind of like a paediatric malnutrition unit, and so I think my wife's hoping to kind of get involved with basically whatever jobs that are available where they need an extra pair of hands while she's out there. So it's interesting to think what family life will be like. I mean, it will be, I think, simpler and slower in loads of respects. With the recent history, Liberia, even compared to kind of nearby Sierra Leone, is not really set up for any kind of tourism or anything like that. So I think it's going to be a lot of, hopefully precious family time with our kids at this young age. Lots of time in the water.
No phones, no Xbox.
I was going to say, truly amazing experience.
Yeah,
have you given a commitment to be out there for a certain period of time?
So we're aiming for 4 years, and then reassess. The organisation who we're going with, they like people to commit for 2 years and then come back, have a bit of a debrief, and then decide more. But the guy Simon, he kind of said, look, it'll take you a year to feel even remotely kind of comfortable there, and by year 2 you'll start to feel like you know what you're doing. And then if you leave at that point, you're kind of leaving maybe a bit prematurely. So he said, why don't you mentally commit to 4 years? And we're happy with that. So
and that probably fits in with the education of your oldest child as well, doesn't it? That sort of
absolutely.
Gets coming into secondary school.
And exactly. Are you going to be charting this experience somehow for people to follow? I suppose it's such I mean, outside of dentistry, I think just a British-based family going out to Liberia is a very unusual thing to do anyway. And then when you layer over that the dentistry element, I'm sure there'll be people that will be interested in on a number of different levels. Can they keep in touch with you somehow?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you said that, actually, because I used to do a bit of wedding photography, and I thought of the idea of maybe doing some kind of video blog thing. My wife really doesn't like the idea of being on camera, so I have to tell her that you said it was a good idea.
I think it is. You can just blur her out; she'll be fine.
That's what I said. Yeah, just perpetually blurred out and different audio voiceover. I mean, we've got a website. If you type in the Hunters in Liberia.co.uk, that comes up with our website. That then links to, we've got an Instagram with the same. It's we've kind of set it up, but obviously we haven't gone yet, so I haven't got anything too much to put on. But yeah, we'd love to get a I mean, this is why I'm so grateful for you guys having me on this podcast. I'd love to have the dental community behind us as well, because I do think that, we've got our friends and family and other networks behind us, but I think there's going to be a really interesting dental element of this for me to be able to share. And I'm also aware that, that I'm not even remotely going to be able to just deal with everything that comes along. And I'm going to need some advice, and it'd be lovely to have kind of the dental hive mind behind for some of the more difficult things that we come across.
Well, we can definitely drop that link in the guest notes. And you say that outside of dentistry, you're pretty obsessed about spearfishing. Although I only know one person that does this, and he says the same thing as you, which is there seems to be a disproportionate amount of time not hitting things than hitting things. I guess because you're in Monrovia, which is on the coast, are there going to be some experts out in Liberia that are going to help you with that, honing that skill?
Oh, I haven't been able to find any Spiros. That's what they're called. Any Spiros out in Liberia. There's a Spiro in Sierra Leone, so I'm gonna have to visit him. But I've just got to persuade my wife that it's safe enough for her to let me just paddle out into the ocean and have a little look. But when we were out there were a bunch of boys who they were just splashing the water, and I just saw them. They must have scared this fish into the corner of the beach and just pulled out this giant fish. So there's clearly stuff to be caught.
Yeah, wow. Excellent.
Oh, wow.
I think it sounds amazing. I think, and amazing as the whole thing, really.
Yeah, it is, and hats off to you, because as you said, you go through moments where you go, "What the heck are we doing? Is this really a good idea?" Um, but it will be life changing, and I think for you and your family, but also for the people of Liberia. And I think the fact there is a program in place to introduce more, you know, clinicians across the country, and you're going to be right at the forefront of that. You can imagine in 20, 30, 40
Yeah,
years
definitely.
time, they could have this program that spans the whole country, and you were there at the beginning or quite early on, which is pretty cool.
Oak trees
Yeah, it's
out
an
of
honour.
acorns grow.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll definitely drop that link in the guest notes so people can stay in touch with you. And
brilliant.
Thank you.
my take has always been that the UK dental profession is incredibly supportive and helpful. And I don't doubt for a moment that if you reach back when you're out there, there'll be endless people looking to give you help and support and
tips.
guidance
Yeah, definitely.
on things. And it would be, like I said, I'll definitely follow you on Instagram. I'd love to keep in touch in terms of how it goes and what it looks like. But before we leave you to go and treat more patients this afternoon, we do have to ask you two questions before you're allowed to go. If you could be a fly on a wall, where would you be and who'd be there?
I thought about this one. I feel like I need to caveat or qualify my answer a little bit. Yeah, I mentioned
It's going to be a good one. It's going to be interesting. Then. Go on.
I mentioned I did the theology degree, and there's a type of biblical study called or biblical interpretation called typology, and it's basically where you look at kind of earlier parts of the Bible, mostly in the Old Testament, and look at how they foreshadow later events in the Bible, most commonly about how they foreshadow Christ. And so an example would be kind of that during the Passover, when you've got the final plague of Egypt, which is death of all the firstborn sons. The Israelites are told to sacrifice a spotless lamb, apply its blood to the doorpost, and then when the angel of death comes, it will see the blood of the lamb, pass over them so they avoid death. So you'd say, okay, this foreshadows Christ as the Lamb of God whose blood is shed on the cross, and then ultimately meaning that those who accept his sacrifice are covered by his blood and death passes over them. And so some of them are quite straightforward. Some of them are really kind of a bit. Some of them are a bit more obscure. But basically, there's a bit in Luke's Gospel where after Jesus' resurrection, he's walking on the road with a couple of his followers, and it says, he says to them, beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So he basically gave the best lecture on typology. So I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that, making notes.
Okay, interesting.
Fabulous.
Now, I can tell you we've never had that one.
No. No. And our follow-up is you could meet somebody. So I'm fascinated in what we're going to get for the answer for this one. You can meet somebody. You can sit down with them, a cup
Living
of
or
coffee,
dead,
glass of
fact
wine.
or fiction.
Yeah. Who would you like to take the opportunity to sit down with?
It's a bit of a random one as well. So there's a man called Klaus Dieter John, who basically, when we were looking at locations of where we could go in the world, one of the places we were offered was Peru, and that's how I heard of this guy. And so he basically felt that he had a desire to build a hospital in Peru for the Quechua people. And so he's managed to do it. It's called Dios Pisciana. And he basically went around the world with the motto, shy dogs don't get fed. And he's basically managed to build this incredible state-of-the-art hospital just through donations and gifts. So all the building supplies, the land, the labour, all of the medical equipment and the shipping, he's managed to get hold of it through donations. They've got like a CT scan from Siemens and dental surgeries from Henry Schein. But anyway, I'd love to meet him because I would absolutely love to be given a Zeiss Extaro microscope to take to Liberia. And so if Carl Zeiss is kind enough to donate one to me, maybe he's the man
anyone
to
listening
ask.
who's got one
Exactly.
that's in a cupboard somewhere.
Wow, that's quite remarkable. The whole thing was funded through donations.
Yeah, and he's written a whole book about it. Just people giving him freebies, letting him, just giving lots of donations. Incredible.
Determined man.
Wow, fair play to him. James, we know you've got patients this afternoon and you've got a lot to sort out between now and when you go off to Liberia.
Definitely.
Honestly, all the very best with it. I think
definitely.
what you're doing is remarkable. I think it really is. And what I love is how diverse and the rich tapestry of UK dentistry is, that we have people who have outlandish hobbies. We have people who have multiple practices, and we have people like you who are going to take your clinical skill and go and help a much needed country. And it's going to be the adventure of a lifetime.
It's going to be amazing. Truly amazing.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's been really lovely chatting to you guys.
Yeah, no,
Brilliant.
it has. Look after yourself, James. Best wishes to you and your family for the adventures ahead of you.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll keep posted on the Hunter, whatever it was, family.co.uk link, whatever it is. No, brilliant.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Thanks
Lovely.
very much.
Cheers, James. Cheers.
Cheers.
Ta-ra.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.